Okay, I think we're ready to regather for Sarah Morelli. Sarah is a colleague of ours, a musicologist, ethnomusicologist over at the University of Denver. And we are going to a similar but not exactly the same part of the world that we've just left with the TMR, and going to India, and we're going to hear about recitation, song, and movement, and Kathak Yoga. Yoga. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Actually, a lot of my paper is going to be on Indian concepts as they developed in the United States. So, walking past the Cultural Integration Fellowship, nicknamed the Ashram, just opposite San Francisco's Golden Gate Park on any given Thursday afternoon, the casual passerby would immediately be struck by the high-pitched white noise of several sets of bells. As one comes closer, the sounds become more distinct. One can then make out the slapping of bare feet on floor and the various pitches and timbres of the tabla drums. Entering this room, one is struck by high humidity, swirling colors, sweat flying, and singing, out of tune and out of breath perhaps, by a group of American women Kathak dancers as one lone Indian man stands behind the tabla leading the fray. This is Chitresh Das and his dance company practicing Kathak Yoga, an innovative and difficult musico-kinesthetic technique practiced thus far only by Pandit Das, as he's respectfully referred to, and his students. Kathak Yoga is one of the more interesting and important contributions to develop out of this Indian artist's confrontation with and integration within America. This presentation explores the embodied experiences and layered meanings of Kathak Yoga for Pandit Das and his students and members of his professional dance company. First, the mechanics. Kathak Yoga demands that a dancer dance, sing, and recite the syllables marking the passage of the rhythmic cycle in which everything else unfolds. I'm going to start here by showing you a clip of Kathak Yoga performed by the Chitresh Das Dance Company. You'll see one dancer named Rachna Nivas. She's playing the harmonium. You can see her on the left. And the other dancers are playing manjira, so there's the addition of instruments as well. They're singing a repeating melody that fits into the rhythmic cycle. Here it's 9.5 beats, and they're reciting the syllables that mark that 9.5 beat cycle that would be played by the tabla drum. Apologies for the shaky camera. In his article, The Ecology of Indian Music in North America, Daniel Newman cites several factors contributing to the continued interest of Indian music in the West, particularly classical music. Those factors include the music's technical virtuosity, improvisatory nature, and religious significance, symbolically exemplifying the quote-unquote spiritual East. These features also mark the music's associated dance form, Kathak. I'll be taking Newman's insights as a starting point for exploring how these three features Technique, improvisation, and spiritualism are utilized in articulating and understanding the practice of Kathak Yoga. First, I'd like to describe the social and historical factors that went into the development of Kathak Yoga. When Pandit Das came to Marin County, just north of San Francisco, in the early 1970s to teach at the Ali Akbar College of Music, his students were primarily white American women. Marin County of those early days is often remembered today as a kind of enclave or cocoon in which one could almost ignore the issues of ethnicity inherent in the performance of this heavily visual art form by dancers who looked so obviously different from that norm. One of Pandit Das's earliest dance students reflects, "I think that within our sphere we all felt at home doing it, largely because Chitresh ji, meaning Pandit Das, was quite clear to us. Stop worrying, that's ego, just dance. But I know he also struggled with how to work with these Western-looking bodies, which are visually so different. But I feel his answer was to go to the core. The core of the study does not have to do with whether you're Western or Indian, really." Going to the core of Kathak in Pandit Das's teaching has meant stressing the technical and rhythmic aspects of the dance. His emphasis on technique over the softer, subtler, and perhaps more subjectively based aspects of the dance form is at its core an emphasis on the oral over the visual. This strategy to circumvent the issue of ethnicity became increasingly necessary as his students began performing with him on stage. He explains, "When I first came here, everybody had a reverse discrimination towards me because my blonde and brunette students didn't look ethnic. So in the question of how can Americans express Indian arts, I focus on the thayari and laikari first, the athletic and rhythmic capabilities. I emphasize this so heavily with the white women so that any Indian will have to look twice. And in that respect, some of my American students are perhaps better than anyone else." For Pandit Das, what was to become Kathak Yoga seems to have developed not only out of his struggles with the issues of ethnicity for his dancers, but also from the real-world challenges of life in the diaspora. In Marin County, he himself was living in another kind of enclave, including some of the most elite artists from India. He says, "In the early days, sometimes the tabla players wouldn't be there. They would go away for concerts because they were just at the beginning of their careers. So I used to practice by myself. I started counting 16 with my tongue, humming the melodies of 16 and dancing. It was out of necessity that these things developed." And the they that he's speaking about, by the way, is mostly Zakir Hussain, the very famous tabla player who was teaching at the Ali Akbar College at that time and also touring quite a lot with Mickey Hart and other musicians. Pandit Das's self-generated rhythmic template developed into Kathak Yoga, which demands that a dancer produce the most basic musical elements necessary for dance accompaniment. The dancer must recite the teka, the syllables representing a tabla player's most basic marking of the pulse of a particular rhythmic cycle. And in the next video clip that I'm going to be showing, that particular teka, that particular rhythmic cycle will be 16 beats, which is called teen tal. And the teka, or the syllables for teen tal rhythmic structure, which you'll hear them say, are the following: dha, din, din, dha, dha, din, din, dha, na, din, din, da, de, de, din, din, da, da. In addition to that recitation of the rhythmic cycle, the dancers will also sing a lehara, which is a cyclic melody serving the same function of basically maintaining the rhythmic cycle. And simultaneously, they'll be dancing rhythmically complex compositions utilizing footwork, turns, hastaks, or hand positions and larger arm movements. So in the next, actually I shouldn't have said they, he, in the next video clip, this is a clip of Pandit Das performing in a production that was called Sadhana. This production was unusual in the sense that it was aiming to show for the audience members not just the dance, but his particular life history and the history of Kathak that informed and infused his artistry. So, so there was talking and presentation about his parents, about their dance school, about the courtesans, the baijis, talayafs, who were once a very important part of this dance form. And also he attempted to show his life in practice as a dancer. So you'll notice that in this clip he is not wearing what might be considered fancy costume. You may not have seen Kathak costume yet, but you will. Here he's just dressed in his sweats with his dance bells. And his mannerisms on stage are also very casual, walking around, humming to himself, trying to show the practice of Kathak Yoga as it developed within the space of his practice space at home. So you'll notice that in addition to that less formal aspect of it, he will be humming a melody that's 16 beats in length. And he'll be doing different types of footwork, different speeds of footwork. Just notice how he plays rhythmically against that self-generated rhythmic template that he's showing through singing. As a pedagogical technique, as Kathak Yoga developed, it was first confined to singing and dancing and recitation. But as the practice developed, and in his own practice, he added one more crucial element, which was playing various instruments. So in the beginning example, you saw the playing of the harmonium, playing of manjira, and I don't believe that any of his students have yet tried to copy him in the next element that he himself has added, which is playing tabla, which are traditionally played sitting on the ground, that are now raised on a platform, playing tabla and dancing at the same time. This is a clip from 2005, and his technique and his abilities in doing this have gotten much more sophisticated in the last 8 years. But here's a good example of some early Kathak Yoga with tabla. He's, in this case, actually singing the melody of a song rather than just the lehera that serves just to mark the time. And you'll notice that he'll be at times playing both tabla and doing footwork at the same time, sometimes one, sometimes the other. Most of this is spontaneous, which is called spontaneous style dancing. So in that clip, you see it's very much for the stage. Most of the time, Kathak Yoga, his emphasis in teaching Kathak Yoga was that it was not for the stage, and in fact should be mainly a practice technique. He places a great emphasis on Kathak Yoga's role as sadhana, or intense, solitary, devoted practice. In describing the experience of and inspiration for Kathak Yoga, Pandit Das evokes images of sadhus or yogis, religious mendicants performing great feats with the mind and body. And actually in some of his own practice, sometimes just like sadhus who sometimes will stand in meditation holding a rock above their heads, he'll take dumbbells, and while he's dancing and singing, he'll hold dumbbells above his head as part of his practice. Yoga itself is now an international phenomenon, recognized both as an ancient Hindu method of spiritual realization and as is more popularly accepted in the West, as a system of physical postures and breathing exercises that serve to foster mental equilibrium and physical fitness. As an ancient Hindu practice, yoga is comprised of several types, though their goal is the same: union, which is also one translation of the word. The practice of yoga ties in with the philosophies of the Hindu school of thought known as Advaita Vedanta, or non-dualism, which teaches that a typical dualistic understanding of the world as comprised of individuals separate from each other and God is incorrect or incomplete at best. The techniques of yoga are used so that one may realize the inherent unity of God and the individual. The experience of spiritual union is expressed in the following passage written by a senior student of Pandit Das, here using dance practice as the vehicle for such non-dualistic understanding. She wrote, "When I am deep into practice and the initial resistance of physical and mental exertion subsides, I enter a realm where there's no other, where time is no more. My body moves beyond a struggle with inertia, and energy emanates from a wellspring beyond myself. Muscles relax into their disciplined patterns, and a fluidity of motion frees my body constraints. I have no wants, desires, preferences. All emotional requirements, responsibilities, and obligations cease. There is neither happiness nor yearning, neither going to nor fro. Every part of me is in motion, and yet, paradoxically, there resides a continuous stillness, a centering that brings great confidence and harmony. Within this realm, I enter into a direct relationship with the divine. a relationship which is my will, in which my will is met in perfect union with divine will. The practice of considering music as a pathway for the divine is common among contemporary practitioners of Hindustani music, and was first mentioned in the 8th century commentary on the Vedic texts, in one of the 8th century commentaries. So while an emphasis on the spiritual aspect of artistic practice is nothing new, in Kathak Yoga, the spiritual significance is physically made manifest in the very mechanics of the practice itself, bringing together the movement as well as rhythm, as well as melody. On the experiential level, the practice of Kathak Yoga has also been overtly therapeutic for some dancers. In 2007, I interviewed one Kathak student who painfully explained to me that she had suffered for years from obsessive-compulsive disorder. Her counselors and therapists first suggested that she take up sitting meditation, but as she described it, as she sat quietly, her mind continued to fixate on the object of her particular compulsion. They then suggested that she try the physical practice of yoga. As she went through yoga postures, she said her mind was still preoccupied and she didn't find relief. Finally, with tears in her eyes, she described how Kathak Yoga was the first practice she experienced that gave her some relief. For that time that she was singing, reciting, and dancing, her mind was free of her fixations. So, at this point in my talk, I'm actually, if you're up for it, I'm interested in having a bit of an experience ourselves of doing some of this singing, counting, and moving. So if you're game, please stand up. You're welcome to move out from behind the chairs, get into the aisles, or come up here to have a little bit more space. The first thing that I would like for us to do, just because it's what we as Kathak dancers do traditionally before and after we dance, is something called pranam, which is a sanctification of the space. And since this conference is about the mind, I'll also point out that we bring our hands together to the mind center, is the belief, here, and then we bring our thumbs to the lips to signify speech, and then to the heart center. So our mind, speech, and heart are centered and focused, and coming together in the practice of Kathak in general, and then Kathak Yoga more specifically. So please just follow me. I'll sing and do the best you can. Actually, the first thing we're going to do is get down and touch the floor. So do that to the best of your ability, and I won't go through all of the techniques of how to do that well at this point. We're just going to go through the practice of pranam. So this is the sanctification of this now dancing space. Okay. So we bring our hands together in prayer position, as is called at the heart center, with the right thumb over the left, toes together if you can, and if you feel like taking off your shoes, you're welcome to do that too. 13, 14, 15, 16, follow me. 1, 2, 3, 4. Coming down to the ground. 5, 6, and mind, speech, and heart. And 9, holding our ears. 10, again, mind, speech, and heart. 13, 14. Hands and toes together. 15, 16, 1. Next, in our Kathak practice, we bow in silence for internally. So feel free to do that. And then, since I'm the one leading all of us, I'll now bow to you and say namaskar, which means the divine in me recognizes, greets, and honors the divine in you. Namaskar. Okay, so let's start with singing, okay? We're not going to recite ha din din da da din din da. That might be a little much for us today, but we're just going to use numbers. We're going to count to 16 as we're singing. Okay, I have a tanpura, or electronic tanpura behind us to set our tonic. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. One more time. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. One. Hold for a second. Good. We're going to keep singing that, but now a little bit about the physical stuff that we'll be doing. I'm going to try to keep it simple for today's demonstration. Now, let's put the left hand with the palm facing up, right hand on top of it. Just hold those hands together right in front of you. This is keeping the upper body relatively free from movement, okay? Basically, we're going to work on footwork, and the reason that we keep our hands here is that so later there's a stability in the upper body, so you can do all kinds of other wonderful things with the arms and the head and the eyebrows and the eyes without everything getting shaken up. You'll see what I mean. So now we're going to bend our knees. Please bring your feet to about a 45-degree angle on either side of the front of the body and bend. Okay, good, like a nice plie. From here, we're going to do what's called diga-digas. So there are words for specific types of footwork in Kathak also. This one's pretty easy. We're just going to lift one heel and bring it down. So the right heel and then the left heel. Diga, diga, diga. Good. Diga. Recite with me, please. Diga, diga, diga. D, double, diga, 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 double, diga, 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 and hold. Good. Okay, so right now we were reciting the bowls of the footwork and doing them. So basically doing the same thing with our mouths as we were doing with our feet. Now we're going to split those a little bit and sing our melody while we do digas with our heels. Okay? Thank you for smiling. You look like you're having fun. Okay. 13, 14, 15, 16, and diga. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, doubling and 1, diga, diga, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 1, diga, 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 1. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, diga, 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 13, 14, 15, diga, 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 1, 2, diga, 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 5, 6, diga, 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 13, 14, 15, 6. So going back and forth. 1, 2, and 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13, 14. One whole cycle going faster. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and 1. Move it the whole way through. Very good. Okay, you can have it. Oh, actually, let's end with pranam. Unless you want to do a little more dancing, I think we have time. But I think that the challenges of the carpet and the you can't see very well. That's it. Actually, I'm going to use a different melody for pranam. It's one we call pranam lehra in a rag called Bhairagi. So go ahead and follow me. It's the one that I was singing at the beginning. 13, 14, 15, 16, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 1. Namaskar. Okay, go ahead and have a seat. Kathak Yoga is a assimilation of several distinct strands of the art form, the melodic, rhythmic, and kinesthetic, within one dancer's practice, reflects yoga's emphasis on union. Pandit Das stresses this relationship in the phrase "Lo Banjai," which translates as "make everything one," or as he commonly extrapolates, "dance in such a way that you become one with everything." Told to him by his guru Pandit Ram Narayan Mishra, this short phrase serves to link the relatively new and potentially controversial practice of Kathak Yoga, not only to traditional forms of yoga, but also to Pandit Das's guru's philosophy, and therefore to the Kathak tradition. But while Pandit Das speaks of the oneness created in the act of Kathak Yoga, it's his students who fill in the blanks. Sorry about that. It's his students who fill in the blanks, couching the practice in the language of American yoga, and even relating it specifically to Hatha Yoga. Another student who's now a dance company member, reflecting on the relationship between yoga and Kathak Yoga, relates the bowls, the syllables used to express compositions like the ones that we just said, diga, 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 relates those syllables to the everyday mind, or the ego, and the tal, the rhythmic cycle, to a higher level of detached consciousness. She says, because there's a detachment that needs to occur. When you say the bowls and dance the bowls at the same time, everything is in the moment. As you start to feel and hear the rhythmic cycle along with your bowls, that requires detachment. So in a sense, you can loosely associate an ego investment in saying the bowls and being in the moment. And as the cycle takes a bigger part of your mind, and as your soul, as you're dancing, then the ego drops away, and it becomes this sort of out-of-body experience. Because you can't really be involved. I personally think you can't be ego involved when you're doing Kathak Yoga, because there's too many things going on. Once your ego gets involved, you screw up. And yoga is a lot about that, right? First, when you're learning to breathe, you're conscious. I'm breathing in. Okay, I'm breathing how? I'm breathing where? Okay, I'm breathing out. That's in the moment. All your attention is fixed on how you're breathing. As you detach from that, and it takes on a life of its own, then your ego is no longer involved. It's not, I am breathing in and I am holding the floor. It just happens. And when that happens, then you detach from it, and it becomes a yogic practice. While for some, the relevance of yoga lies in its ancient Hindu origins, yoga practitioners have also stressed its universality, emphasizing its quote-unquote spirituality, broadly constructed and decontextualized from specific doctrine. Similarly, the choice of the term yoga to identify this dance practice serves to appeal to a traditional Hindu population, while also speaking to mainstream American understandings of its universal message, and thus at the same time reinforcing his school's principles of multiculturalism. Such claims to yoga's universality have been presented to Americans from the late 19th century onward, most notably by Swami Vivekananda, who's credited with bringing Hinduism to America through his 1893 address at the Chicago Parliament of Religions. Another variant on this theme portrays yoga as a synthesis of the best of East and West, as a practice whose roots can be found in ancient Hindu wisdom, yet whose mental and physical benefits can be verified through modern science. Pandit Das and his students similarly stress the benefits of Kathak as a weight-bearing exercise, especially when you're wearing 5 pounds of dance bells. And with the addition of singing and recitation, the practice becomes tremendously more cardiovascular, as I think you saw a little bit of. And in the spirit of science, in 2002, Pandit Das embarked upon what he called a Kathak Yoga experiment with a lung specialist in Stockton, California. They underwent a series of tests attempting to accurately assess his physical output when practicing Kathak Yoga. More generally, the tests aim to prove Kathak's efficacy as a long-term means of maintaining health, undoubtedly with the hopes of promoting Kathak in the emergent alternative health market. While in the 1970s, Pandit Das's students formed a relatively homogeneous group, today his top dancers are much more ethnically diverse. As his students, the most intimate audience for his teachings, have come to the study from a wider range of backgrounds. Pandit Das's technique and philosophy likewise has become more sophisticated. The use of the term yoga serves to illustrate inherent elements of Kathak Yoga as intense spiritual and physical practice, but it also represents the struggles over questions of ethnicity, culture, and authenticity at play for both his students and himself. Originally from Bengal, with a guru from Rajasthan, so eastern India and western India, Pandit Das describes himself as a Bengali Rajput Californian, like his creation Kathak Yoga, not Indian, not American, but a unique synthesis of the two. I'd like to end by just showing you one more clip of Kathak Yoga in performance by members of Chitresh Das's dance company. Now that you've done just a little bit, I think maybe you'll have a slightly different perspective on what you're seeing than earlier in the talk. Oops, 1 hour of workshop. We're going to probably take a break so that there's going to be one more presentation and then
a slight modification. One of the panel members, Lily, has also a presentation to make. So we'll take just a very short break, and then Lily will do her presentation, and then we'll assemble the 3 other colleagues with the 3 presenters and have a little panel discussion to deal with questions and comments. Okay? Thank you very much, Sarah. Wonderful.